people underestimate like a lot of those kind of fringe things that impact their success of enrolling a patient. And I would add the other thing is, call center,
Yeah.
right? Like a lot of these universities that aren't doing active marketing like we talked about, they don't have a call center that is set up to actively convert inbound leads because they've never even had a ton of inbound leads. They might have applications and things of that nature, but they don't have a bunch of email addresses, phone numbers, and understand how to stand up a sales oriented call center. And that's something I think a lot of these universities are going to need to figure out how to do quick. Because even if you can turn on the marketing, if you can't convert it, into a student, which a decent portion of that happens in your call center, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah, and that's assuming you're lucky enough to have an understanding of how to train these people, which 90% of the universities will not. You need to stand up a call center all day unless you outsource it to one that already exists. But if you're going to do it internally, you better have some resources at your disposal to train people on how to enroll students, because you use the term active just in that sentence, that you're actively recruiting and enrolling students is a whole lot different than sitting back and waiting for applications and doing some processing and reviewing of applicants so I can go deny. I mean, that doesn't even exist anymore.
Yep. And I just, we can move on, but I'm very curious to see what happens if we don't have fall collegiate sports for whatever reason. Because a lot of these universities that we talked about earlier spending 1% on marketing, their marketing is their sports teams. And you could have a whole different podcast about that whole side of the business of education and how it relates with the athletes. But, if they don't have fall sports, they're going to be in even bigger trouble than they would be otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, and we can, well, let me say this. It's a lack of, there's a strategic foresight really matters here. I was talking to a university recently, looking at their website, and you go to the website and there's a video, and in the video they have, this is right in the middle of COVID-19, they have two wrestlers getting together, wrestling, and they're showing pictures of their classroom of people shaking hands and hugging, and I'm going, guys, we're right in the middle of COVID-19. Nobody's touching, and if you have a potential student thinking about going and safety and all that, you want to convey the message that everybody's just getting along to get along and wrestling on the mats here. You want to, show maybe the great outdoors and space. And, you have to understand people's psyche right now.
Great point. What are you doing to make sure that your, campus or the college experience is going to be pandemic and recession proof, right? Because even though we're trying to get through this, I think everybody's of the mind that now once something like this happens, you feel like it's possible that it can happen again. And you want to make sure that the institution that you choose is prepared for it so that it's not a huge just stop in your education and your learning. So I think that's interesting. As we pivot a bit, though, I'm really curious about, Joe, what you think the public's perception of higher ed is through COVID-19 and moving forward. You think it's changed?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a really layered conversation in there. I think the first thing is, and you guys are seeing some of the lawsuits happening, it's, I'm paying $50,000 a year, and I'm now online. I paid for cafeteria, I paid for dorm room, I paid for on-campus student services. I don't have any of that now. I didn't get my money back, so now I'm upset. So I think that is the first and most visible thing that we're seeing is, this ethical construct of some of these universities, if they return all the money, that would be it. So for them, it's do I, don't I, so I think that's the first, public piece that we're seeing as a result of COVID-19. I think, simultaneously we're seeing some of the admission scandal stuff still play itself out from varsity blues, but irregardless of that, that's one. Two, do people now need, there's going to be tens of millions of people out of work. Higher ed has always banked on the idea that degrees are everything. And I still think they are. I still think it's a golden ticket. If you get a degree, your chances of success are still higher than if you don't have it over the long run. However, what can non-credit skills-based learning do for people who are out of work now, and I think we're going to see a satisfied a potential piece of the population that doesn't believe a degree has value. We're going to see more non-credit programs satisfy those types of consumers, and I think that's going to help the public perception and the value of higher education in general. But I think right now, it's to your point, Kamaar, it's what about fall? Guys, I'm going to shut this door right here. Sorry. What about fall? And, until we see the decision making happen for fall, we're still not going to truly understand what's happening. We don't know if infection rates are going to spike as students go back. The California, I live in Southern California. We've seen the UC, University of California schools, and California Community College basically say they're all online for the fall. So what's the public perception? The answer is the public doesn't yet understand how that risk is going to affect their kids. And how many, if you're a parent, are you going to send your kid off to a massive college with tons of people if they say they're going to open in the fall? I don't know the answer.
What would you say? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
What do you think right now is the biggest gap in higher education currently?
The biggest gap, I'm going to go back to one of my original points. I think the biggest gap that exists right now is the lack of recognition of the exponential increase in competition that's going to exist in a few months when everybody comes to terms and admits it. And I think right now there's some failure to admit it because I think there's still a great number of people that are thinking that things will go back to normal. I don't think they will. I don't think that back to normal will ever exist. There are always going to be some components that have changed. And in the minds of the consumer and the parent, particularly sending their kid off to college, or if you're an adult student thinking about going somewhere, what's your risk tolerance going to be? Before, it was really zero. I go to school, I come back. Now it's when I go to school, X, Y, and Z might happen. I've got to bring a mask and gloves and who knows for how long. So I think risk tolerance is going to be a big factor and part of the gap. But when you're looking at overall competition, what's going to happen? There's already discounting. You've seen schools like Southern New Hampshire University come out and set a flat tuition rate of $10,000 for students that attend in fall moving forward. They're going to give their first semester free and then $10,000 of the flat rate moving forward. Now that reduces that gives you less risk. If you think there's less financial risk, maybe you're more willing to take more health risk. Just you look at the gap that exists there of how this all shakes out. But I think when it's all said and done, there's this piece of, and the reason I say it won't ever go back to normal is because there's a reduced fixed cost with running online programs. And even universities that want to stay on ground are going to realize very quickly that they can run and survive longer with online programs. Now, you're a student consumer and you're looking at going somewhere, and what looks like 10 choices now, like I said, has become 100 choices.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people kind of waiting to see what is going to happen in the fall.
Yeah. And
my fear is that that's a very reactionary and problematic kind of mindset, right? Because all of the traditional historical online programs that have all the infrastructure that we're talking about, that understand active marketing, their last enrollment period just ended and they're marketing aggressively for the fall right now.
Yeah.
And if you're one of those people that's going to sit back and wait and to see what happens in the fall, if it doesn't go your way and that coin flip lands on tails and you were betting on heads, what's your out?
Yeah.
If suddenly 30 days before the semester is supposed to start, 30% of your student volume falls off for whatever reason, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I think a lot more people need to start saying, how can I get this started now? How can I kind of look at it like an airline and almost overbook my enrollment, knowing that I'm going to have a drop off? And if I don't, just like the airlines, that's a great problem to have, and we can kind of figure it out operationally.
Yeah, I mean, think about the noise. Even for those that just figure it out, there's just going to be more to choose from. And when there's more to choose from, it's a whole lot easier to lose students, even when they're in a funnel. Even even when they're in a stitching process, if you want to use those sort of industry terms, it's easy to pluck them right out.
So now that I'm a student in Southern New Hampshire, already has a plan, already has a discount in place. I don't have to leave my house, and you're telling me that you're waiting to figure out what's going on. 30% of my students, or 10,000 students, just decided to go there because it was already wrapped up, it was already done, decision made for me, and I avoid a lot of risk because I don't even have to leave the house, right? If I do get sick, I'd like to be close to home, right? So all of those things kind of go into the decision. So that's a heck of a point, Steve. And your strategy and your plan is extremely important. What are some changes that you see in the upcoming years outside of competition that we're not paying attention to, that we're not aware of, that we haven't recognized yet?
I think for better or for worse, I think we have so much intellectual capital in higher ed that we do recognize most of the upcoming changes. I think it's the gap, to your point, that exists is our willingness to accept that change is here. And that's where you see traditional universities moving online. I mean, everything's online. The fact that we have to convince people that there's some benefit to being online is ludicrous in my mind. But I think that if you're looking at obstacles for higher education, certainly pricing and debt is where it's going to be at. Dust settles. How have I revised my pricing? If I'm offering more online, have I dropped my price to account for the fact that dollar is passed back onto the consumer as savings if I don't have the physical infrastructure that I would have had before to teach them? And so I think there's going to be a big outcry and opportunity for schools to reprice if they're very high. And you guys know this. The biggest racket in higher education is the whole discounting thing, right? I price my program at $50,000, $100,000, and then I do a $47,000 discount or a $50,000 scholarship, and it's like, okay, to be elite, to create some mirror, smoke and mirror that I'm more elite because my price is higher. It's boy, isn't it just literally like a pair of shorts you buy at Finish Line or Nike that are listed for $14 and they have a red ticket on them that says $7.99. I mean, it's the same concept. It's just in higher education, for some reason, you think that the pair of shorts is so much better because it costs more, and that's not the case with online learning. You can get a high quality education, in any way that you want it, with group work, without group work, one-on-one, and I think those are the obstacles. That's the acceptance. I think the biggest piece is, we're all dealing with faculty. There's a lack of general acceptance to what's the future look like? And that's if I had the answer, I would tell you guys. But what I do know is that I work for 100% fully online by design university, and that was intentional, not on accident. I mean, I think that's where the future is.
Yeah, you said something that really resonated with me. I was watching Elon Musk on the AI podcast probably about a week ago, and he was going back and forth with the MIT grad that hosts the podcast. I can't remember his name right now. I just started watching it, and he was kind of challenging Musk on the automatic cars, or the ones with no drivers, like driverless cars. And he was talking about accident rate and how safe they are. And, Elon Musk basically said, no, he said it's safer, automated. It's much safer, it's safer now, but when we perfect it, it's going to be, light years safer. And, he kind of talked about how the rate of the driver consciousness or paying attention to the car goes down the more automated the process is. So Elon said, well, you remember elevators used to have a guy in there, right?
Yeah.
The guy used to take you from floor to floor. He said, well, if you did that today, we would think it was crazy, right?
Yeah.
And he said that's going to be the same thing, with cars, soon. And it's almost like you're saying the same thing about online. Like, yeah, it's been the better product. It just makes more sense. And now we're kind of finally catching up to the fact that, it actually, really does make sense. So